Coming up, Department of Energy Deputy Secretary David Turk talks clean energy in Native communities. A Navajo musician combines traditional culture with jazz. And we learn about a new art installation in Southern California. I'm Aaliyah Chavez. Join us for those interviews, plus headlines from the ICT Newscast.
This program is made possible by the Corporation for Public Broadcasting, a private corporation funded by the American people.
Arizona State University welcomes 3,500 Indigenous students from Arizona and across the nation. It serves one of the largest populations of Indigenous students among U.S. colleges and universities. We created a sense of place for tribal nations to create futures of their own making through community outreach and research, taught by world-class Indigenous faculty where they see a reflection of themselves and their experiences. Find community at ASU.
Amadawa Hopa, thank you for joining us. We start in Montana, where new data shows over a quarter of the remaining wild buffalo in Yellowstone National Park are gone. The national park released its latest report Friday, finding over 1,600 buffalo have been removed from the population by means of hunting or captivity. That stands in comparison to August 2022, when the bison population stood at a record high of 6,000. Leaders from Roam Free Nation, a Montana-based wild buffalo advocacy group, weighed in, calling the bison mismanagement at Yellowstone as, quote, growing out of control. Tribal leaders in the area have weighed in, including Nez Perce leader Quincy Ellenwood, who's called for limits to how many bison can be taken. In addition to planned hunts, winter seasons can be a cause of unusually high decline. Yellowstone estimates that 9 out of every 100 adult bison naturally die over the winter. Indigenous college students competed against one another at this year's Knowledge Bowl, which is a quiz competition that promotes Native history. That was all on display over the weekend at the annual conference of the American Indian Higher Education Consortium, also known as AHEC.
Name 2 of the 10 regions named in the book.
The southeastern woodlands and the Great Plains.
Correct. This is an annual event that is held for all 37 TCUs. It is a student-centered event to make sure that they have an opportunity to come and network and meet with others and compete in a range of academic and other kinds of activities.
Fully express ourselves however we want, and to be able to pick from certain categories that touch on like a whole bunch of subjects. I think it's fun for everyone to just be themselves.
Just amazing, just like hearing people come from places I've never heard of, because I come from a place that is really small, so it's kind of cool to see meet people with similar like life experiences in that way.
One of the unique opportunities that tribal college students get that they would not receive at traditional universities, and that is this opportunity to come to national events that are organized just for them and to be able to compete in all kinds of activities. We are essentially celebrating the unique indigenous set of values, traditions, and cultures that our tribal colleges and universities were created to preserve, to enhance, and to ensure that the students are the successors of that.
These are like all your people, and like all the natives are here and stuff like that. Like it's good to be comfortable. Like just don't be scared, stuff like that. Like I was scared, but I got used to it like the minute I walked in here.
I think it's amazing. I think it's great to have it after so long. I was supposed to come here actually in 2020 when it was canceled. It's great to be back and just see everyone and just compete. It's good to just talk to them and just one-on-one with people that you don't know. Learning a lot from other people.
This is all about students. They are the product of our institutions, and they're the future leaders of their communities.
It looks like clear skies ahead for Mount Blue Sky. That's after Colorado Governor Jared Polis endorsed stripping the name Mount Evans from the iconic peak visible from Denver and instead renaming it Mount Blue Sky. John Evans was Colorado's territorial governor in 1864 when about 200 Cheyenne and Arapaho people were killed in the Sand Creek Massacre. Native people have long called for the renaming of the mountain. It was last week when Governor Polis asked the Federal Board on Geographic Names to officially rename the area. The panel is expected to accept the request, and that is welcome news to Cheyenne and Arapaho leaders.
I think this is a momentous day. It's Mount Evans is there in Colorado by Denver, and it's well known. And when we change the name, or the name will be changed to Mount Blue Sky, it's a significance not only to the Cheyenne Arapaho people, but I think to everybody. It's a refreshing name. It just brings a little bit of healing.
Well, Oklahoma was a popular spot this weekend as Indigenous people traveled from all over the country for a chance to star in a popular TV show. Thousands of Indigenous people from more than 28 different states attended an open casting call in Tulsa for the hit series Reservation Dogs. The line wrapped around an elementary school and seeped into nearby neighborhoods for blocks. Put on by Indigenous and local casting companies Mid-Thunder Casting and Freihofer Casting, the open call gives paid roles for the show's upcoming Season 3. The award-winning series will continue production for its newest season this summer. Sterlin Harjo, Seminole and Muskogee citizen and co-creator, took to social media to show his gratitude, stating that it was a hard sight to believe. And those are the headlines for the ICT Newscast. Delbert Anderson is a classically trained trumpeter who grew up in Farmington, New Mexico. Now he is an artist in residence at the Institute of American Indian Arts and joins us now with more. Welcome, Delbert.
Hello, thank you for having me.
Congratulations on all of your recent creative endeavors. Tell us about your Santa Fe residency.
I start March 8th, and that will continue till April 21st. So I'll be there for about a month and a half doing research on post-Indigenous ensembles, boarding school ensembles.
How can people hear you play?
They can go to DelbertAnderson.com. I believe there will be a lot of live footage of the jazz jams and all the different performances that I'll be hosting. I'm bringing in tons of guest artists, so it'll be a great time. I think Facebook is probably the best way to see what's going on, as well as watch some of these live videos.
As you just mentioned, you're bringing native jazz players with you. Tell us about some of the musicians that are joining you.
Some of the major musicians that have been in music for the longest time, people like Julia Keefe. She's Nez Perce vocalist, jazz vocalist from Brooklyn, New York. Also, Michael Gutierrez, who is a native from Arizona. We have the same mentors and teachers. And I'm also bringing in, like my teachers, one of my first jazz teachers, Christopher Beatty, that I met at ENMU. He's coming down. So it's just going to be a wonderful time of music and just friendships of all the network that I grew up building. It's going to be nice to see all of these individuals here face to face.
Delbert, I'm really curious how this opportunity fell into your lap of becoming an artist in residence.
Yeah, I am from Farmington, New Mexico. So Santa Fe is very close, and we have only played in Santa Fe, I would say 2 or 3 times in my entire lifetime. However, the network I was in, I started attending conferences and booking conferences and started to meet a lot of other Indigenous artists, and I knew sort of, the talk of a Santa Fe IAIA residency was always a popular subject to talk about. And someone, I can't remember their names, but they told me to apply. So I started to apply, and I know the IAIA residency was originally created for visual artists. And these are, I believe this year is one of the first times they started selecting musicians. And so I'm very happy to be a part of, some of the very first musicians who are in this residency.
I'm really curious if you can describe the community of folks who play trumpet and are Indigenous. I mean, you're the first one that I'm meeting personally, but maybe describe that kind of community and maybe what you're doing to grow it.
Yeah, it's very small, and I'm actually doing research right now on Indigenous, musicians, and I came across an individual named Jacob C. Morgan, who was actually a native from Crown Point, New Mexico. He later died here in the 1950s in Farmington. However, he had a very a great classical trumpet career, and he really reminds me of myself, seeing all the great things that he's been doing as a musician. He was an educator, a minister, the chair of the Navajo Nation Council, and a carpenter, and he's just an amazing individual. But after that, I'm starting to find other trumpet players that are playing trumpet in the Navajo Nation band. There's a lot of them from Arizona, California that I'm running into. And so this community is actually there. It's just a little unrepresented right now. And I've been doing things like the research project with Jacob C. Morgan and other projects just like jazz jams to invite these Indigenous trumpet players to a stage to really start to get them out there and to show, the entire world that, that we exist and we love jazz and that it's a huge part of our history as well.
Well, Delbert Anderson, the artist in residence at IAIA. Unfortunately, we've run out of time today, but thank you so much for being here.
Thank you.
One part of President Joe Biden's priorities for the U.S. is to move to a clean energy future. The Department of Energy is leading that charge for the Biden-Harris administration. Just last week, the agency announced $300 million for projects that increase energy affordability and promote climate resilience for communities that are located in remote areas. I sat down with the Energy Deputy Secretary David Turk to learn more about this funding and how Indigenous communities could potentially implement it. Deputy Secretary Turk, this is your first appearance on the ICT Newscast. Welcome.
Well, thanks, Aaliyah, and I hope this is not my last appearance as well. It's a pleasure to be with you.
DOE announced $300 million in funding last week for projects in remote communities. Tell us about that funding and how tribes especially are in a unique position to apply for it.
Yeah, so this is super exciting, and it's not just this $300 million pot of money, but there's other opportunities as well for tribes across our country. The $300 million is for something that we've called energy improvements in rural and remote areas. So this is for tribes, but for others in communities of 10,000 or less, and it's quite flexible money. It's meant to lower costs, it's meant to promote resiliency and to help in our decarbonization path. So we're super excited, and being someone from a community of less than 10,000 people, I'm particularly excited that we're making this opportunity available.
What are some examples of the kinds of projects that DOE would invest in order for these communities to get this funding?
The exciting part of this opportunity is this is not DC telling communities what they should do. I can give you a few examples of what might make sense, but this is trying to hear from communities about how we can use these federal resources to leverage local resources to try to make improvements in real people's lives across smaller communities, including tribes across our country. So certainly there's huge opportunities with solar, with wind, with renewables to lower cost. You think of some of our native communities, our tribes in Alaska, for instance, paying huge amounts of money for diesel on a regular basis. If we can have renewable solutions, other solutions that are good for the environment, but good for the pocketbook, and it requires a little bit of federal funding to make those work on the front end, then that's the kind of thing that we're really excited about here.
How can we, as the average American, conceptualize $300 million in actually meeting these goals of helping remote communities? How much can $300 million actually accomplish?
Well, this is what's exciting about the fact that it's not just this $300 million. I'll give you a couple other examples of opportunities that tribes could be interested in across our country. $300 million, when you talk about all those communities across our country that are less than 10,000, that does not go that far. We're looking to catalyze this. We're looking to take huge opportunities out of this. 300 million is also not a small amount of money. So we think we can do quite a bit with this funding. But what we also have are other pockets of money that are available. Another one that I'd point you to is a couple hundred additional $1 million, $225 million in particular, specifically reserved for Indian tribes, Indian households for home energy rebates. So if a household wants to have a heat pump and save money and do good for the environment, to improve insulation or to improve efficiency of the particular house, up to $14,000 per household. So this is a lot of money helping a particular house, a particular community in that kind of way. We also recently got legislation that allowed us to increase our impact from our loan program. So we have a loan program here at the Department of Energy that's made loans all across the country. It was actually responsible for some of the initial loans for Tesla back in the day to get Tesla off the ground. We have an Indian tribal part of that loan program. It had a $2 billion cap previously. Now we're up to $20 billion. So we've got an awful lot more money. And it's exciting that this money can go directly to tribes. One of the restrictions before was tribes had to partner with a private sector actor in order to get into the loan program. We now have the flexibility of working with tribes in particular. So the 300 million itself will have an impact, but there's a broader group of opportunities beyond that as well.
You're fresh off of a visit with Native leaders. What can you tell us about your trip with the Alaska Federation of Natives?
Well, I had a terrific discussion with them, and it's a phenomenal group. And one of the parts that I'm most excited about here is many of us join the federal government for real world impact. And when I have meetings like I had recently, and I've had many other meetings, I was in the Four Corners area on the New Mexico side in Farmington not too long ago as well. There's a number of places and opportunities where we can have real world impact. So it's inspiring to be able to actually meet with, and now more and more in person, meet with tribal leaders, meet with community leaders, meet with others where we can have a real impact with these resources. And so a lot of good ideas were generated and a lot of good feedback as well. We have to be humble in the federal government, learn from, take guidance from, hear feedback from communities all across the country, including tribal communities, so that we're taking advantage of these resources that all of us as taxpayers are putting in.
I want to talk about the Willow Project. Our viewers might be familiar with it. It's the oil drilling venture in Alaska by the company ConocoPhillips. Was the Willow Project front of mind for Alaska Native leaders at AFN? And if you had to give us a percentage of how many Alaska Native leaders were in favor of it, based on who you spoke to, what would you say?
Yeah, so to be clear, it's other departments, the Department of Interior and others who have regulatory jurisdiction over these kinds of decisions. It's not the Department of Energy, even though we are the Department of Energy. We, of course, work closely with our sister agencies and brother agencies to try to help inform their decision-making along those lines. One thing I've come to learn is you can't take one community and think that it's the right answer for another community. Different communities, different tribes have very, very different perspectives. And so one thing that I think is incredibly important is don't assume, make sure you're asking, make sure you get the nuance, make sure you hear what's important for this community or that community. One thing that's incredibly exciting is we have a new head of our Arctic Energy Office, which will help our tribes and Native Americans in Alaska in particular. First time ever, we've had someone who was born and raised in Alaska as head of that Arctic Energy Office. We also have an Indian Energy Office in which we try to make sure we have those iterative conversations to learn from, to make sure we're picking up the guidance, not just hearing what one tribe is saying or one leader is saying in this context, but really learning the full landscape.
Let's move to Nevada, where another company, Lithium America, is drilling for lithium in order to build batteries for electric cars. I'm curious, in your view, how does the Department of Energy responsibly move to a clean energy future while also protecting the homelands of tribal nations?
Well, there is no doubt as we shift, and we need to shift over to these clean energy technologies, right? There is a climate imperative that imperils all of us. And we've got a mega drought out west. Many communities, including Native American communities, are being impacted right now, and it could only get worse. So I feel proud to be part of an administration that's stepping up, that's doing what we need to do on the clean energy front, on the climate front. There's also no doubt in my mind, we're going to need an awful lot of critical minerals and other PV, batteries, wind turbines, materials that go into all of these technology areas going forward. Right now, unfortunately, we've fallen asleep at the switch, and much of that is mined and much of that is processed in other countries. And so we have a national security imperative and economic imperative as well. I think the key is with any particular project to make sure we have the kind of engagement that we need to make sure that we're going about this in the right way. Does this area make sense? Maybe not. Does this area make sense? Maybe yes. How do we think about the processing piece? How do we ensure that we have jobs? How do we ensure we have economic opportunities? Especially, and I think this administration has made an incredible commitment on this, for communities that haven't gotten their fair share in the past, for communities that have borne the brunt of pollution in the past. How do we make sure as we're spending this money, as we're looking for these opportunities to do good by our climate, we do good by the communities that deserve it the most in our country? And that is tricky. That rubber hits the road on particular projects there. There's no doubt about it.
Deputy Secretary of Energy, David Turk, thanks so much for being here.
Thanks, Aaliyah. It's a pleasure and happy to join you back whenever you'd like to have us on. Thank you.
Sandra Schulman is an arts writer whose work has appeared in places like ICT, Billboard, Variety, and Rolling Stone. Her recent reporting has brought us stories like the Indigenous artist whose work was chosen to represent Super Bowl 57. And we even learned about the Indigenous winners of the MacArthur Genius Awards through her interviews. Sandra is here with us in studio today to talk about her upcoming reporting. Hi there, Sandra. Welcome to Phoenix.
Thank you. Good morning.
So I want to just jump right in here because Desert X is the name of a new art installation in Southern California.
Yes.
But tell us about it.
Desert X started 6 years ago. It's a biennial art installation that was started by a woman named Susan Davis. And she lives in Palm Springs, so she started it there. But she pulled in very big name artists, but also to give, to honor the land that they were on, because the majority of the Coachella Valley, where Palm Springs is owned by the Cahuilla Band. They own almost all the property, the big businesses, beautiful parts of the desert and the parks. So the idea was to make the land a part of the art. So the installations, which are very large scale, enormous, are chosen to fit in areas of the desert to give a history or have a kind of a discussion with it or give information about the land that it sits on.
Give us some more information on how an art installation like this is so important and unique. It sounds like something like this hasn't really been done before.
It's very unique because of the location and because of the scale. And they were getting big name artists to put things out in the desert that are open to the public. I mean, you can go up and touch it. Some of them are immersive. You can climb upstairs, you can sit in it. So that's unusual because usually art by big name artists you're not allowed to touch. And it's out in the elements, which plays a big part. We actually had a hailstorm there 2 weeks ago. The winds come through there 70, 80 miles an hour almost every week. So things have to take into account, the materials that they make these pieces out of.
I want to actually talk about why you're here in Phoenix, and that, of course, was for the Herd Market this weekend. Tell us what stood out to you.
The Herd Market, I had never been. I've been to the Herd. I actually screened a film there, a documentary I made many years ago, but I'd never been to the art market. And I was so impressed. It's so well done, beautifully done. The Herd uses all their parking lots and the courtyards, all their beautiful grounds there. And really top name artists, the same kind of people that you would see at the Santa Fe Art Market, which has been running over 100 years. And so they vet the artists very well there. Actually, these earrings were from Jane Myers, who is the producer of Prey, which was the hit movie on Hulu, but she's also a jewelry designer.
I understand that one of the artists who won an award at the Herd this weekend, you made an interesting connection there. Tell us about that.
Yes, I'm always looking for the thread, what ties things together in the art world and, in the world in general. And what was interesting is the winner of Best in Show at the Herd Market was a piece called Navajo Land that they took a Monopoly board, but they made from scratch using materials and imagery that you would find in the Dene territory. I think they have a sheep and they had a moccasin as the play pieces, but everything was made by hand, and some out of silver. They had a turquoise nugget. That won Best in Show. And one of the best pieces at Desert X is by a Cahuilla artist, Gerald Clark, who's also a teacher. He took a Cahuilla basket and blew it up 100 feet across. And then it's made out of rice wattles, which I'd never heard of. It's a construction material. It's this tubing stuffed with rice and straw. And he coiled it like a giant basket and set it out in the desert, and then put planks on top shaped like the dark designs you would see in a basket. So it's a maze. It's a game maze. And you're given cards, or you can do it on your phone. And to advance into the center of the maze, you have to answer questions about Native history. Most people do not know the answers, and they cheat, which is part of American history also. But when you get to the center, there's QR codes on the ground, and when you point your phone at them, you get a song or a story about the Cahuilla history. So it's a really lovely, immersive way to learn about it.
That's wonderful. Well, Sandra Schulman, the arts writer for ICT, thank you so much.
That's it. Thank you.
And that's a slice of our Indigenous world. For all the latest, visit ictnews.org. From all of us in the newsroom, stay safe, my relatives.
This program is made possible by the Corporation for Public Broadcasting, a private corporation funded by the American people.